All right, everybody, welcome back to another hour of Cross Connection. I'm Tiffany Cross. Now, Monday's jaw-dropping FBI search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home has given way to horrifying yet familiar calls for political violence from some of Trump's most loyal sycophants. And just this week is happening already, barely 72 hours after the Mar-a-Lago shakedown, a 42-year-old MAGA loyalist named Ricky Schieffer tried breaking into a Cincinnati FBI office armed with a nail gun and, get this, an AR-15. He was ready for, quote, combat with the officers inside. Now, Schieffer was later shot dead by police in the shootout that followed. So make no mistake about it. These folks walk it like they talk it. We've seen it before. And this is exactly what happens when Trump supporters get riled up by seditious grifters like Steve Bannon and Steve Crowder, who make lots of money telling millions of followers they're at war with the federal government. So how do we even prepare for what's to come? Joining me now, Roland Martin. He's back with me, host of the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show, and Professor Jason Blazakis, director of Middlebury Institute Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism. Jason, I want to start with you because this aggressive language doesn't always directly cause physical harm, of course, but it does create an environment where these aggressive and violent people just feel emboldened, which ultimately makes actual violence against people or institutions more likely. So, honestly, who's most at risk right now, and what should we be doing right now as a country to prepare, considering we have already seen how violent these folks can be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there is a laundry list of targets. It's a really long laundry list, unfortunately. I think, January 6th actually points to the government being a target, Republicans and Democrats alike. We saw Michael Pence, Vice President Pence, was in the sight line of radical right-wing extremists. And then this week, we saw the FBI subject of attack because of its investigation related to Trump's keeping of classified documents. So the federal government is a target, but the target list goes beyond that. It includes ethnic minorities. We saw in Buffalo just in May, a Black supermarket was targeted by an individual who had animus for Black Americans. In that manifesto that individual wrote, he talked about targeting nonprofit organizations if they're trying to facilitate a multicultural America. And we've seen targeted focus by radical right-wing extremists looking at individuals within specific religious faiths, like the Jewish faith, for instance. We remember the Robert Bowers attack from 2018 on the Pittsburgh synagogue. And then 2019, the El Paso attack, focusing on Hispanic Americans because of this perception of an invasion. So it really runs the gamut, that target list, unfortunately.
It is unfortunate. And Roland, I think one of the most interesting things about all this is that we have known that Trump has called for this level of violence for a long time. I want you to just remind our viewers, I wanted to play something about with Trump calling for this level of violence the past few years.
We're not allowed, the guards are very gentle with him. He's walking out like big high fives, smiling, laughing. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Rough up, maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing.
So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise.
Okay, so Roland, this is my problem here. I just want to make this point really quickly. He was saying all of this before he was elected in office. What drives me nuts is the mainstream media trying to sanitize the people who rocked with this dude even then, who echoed his sentiments, who celebrated him, voted for him, and still ride with him. And they didn't jump off that train until it became convenient to do so. Those folks are now on TV giving insight into, well, here's what I think. And it's like, no, boo, you were on the side of violence. You don't get to do that now. And that normalizes what these people are trying to do. Take it away.
Well, as you were setting this up, I was just sitting here scrolling. I wasn't ignoring Tiffany at all. And I'm literally looking at the Republican Twitter feed.
Tell us about it.
I'm actually trying to find the condemnation of the attack on the FBI in Cincinnati. And
but they're pro-law enforcement.
Now, maybe it's there, but I'm now at 5 days back. I haven't seen it. See, this is a perfect example.
But aren't they pro-law enforcement?
Right, so supposedly, Blue Lives Matter, supposedly that,
and
this is precisely the point. When you have Republicans now calling for the defunding of the FBI. Oh, wait a minute. I thought you were using that to attack Democrats for defunding the police. Oh, but because they're now holding Trump accountable, now you want to defund the police. whole deal with the attacks. Look, when I lit into Chris Christie on ABC this week in September, God, it was almost a year ago.
I remember.
What happened there? Same thing. He was offended. I said, no, you were riding with him. Ari Fleischer writes this column explaining why he's voting for Donald Trump. Eric Erickson, prominent conservative. None of these people have any room to all of a sudden now condemn what's happening. They chose to pick power over principles, over character and integrity. And that's the fundamental problem here. And so that's all they care about. And so why are they still riding with him? Because they want to maintain power. These people have no decency, they have no honor, and any Republican that is willing to stand with Donald Trump and MAGA needs to lose in November. And that's why Democrats sitting out there watching have better stop playing around, hoping for, oh my goodness, I haven't gotten everything I wanted, because what the hell did these people plan to unleash on America, you have no idea, and we had better understand. And you ask who they're targeting, black folks are the primary target, and it's because white fear is driving this, because it's about maintaining power and control.
Power and control, that's a scary thing. And so when you think about that, Jason, because when we talk about the political violence, I do think about Texas, a state where the Republican governor there, Greg Abbott, has pretty much made it guns for everybody.
And Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor.
And Dan Patrick, guns for everybody. And then they have also empowered partisan poll watchers. So when you think about and they have emboldened people to deputize themselves law enforcement, to prevent women from having autonomy over their bodies. So when you think about the confluence of those three things, you can have armed partisan poll watchers controlling the voting process. You can have armed men trying to, think they're doing something right by stopping women from crossing state lines. We don't have the same level of protection outside the Beltway for some of our institutions across the country. You don't have multiple law enforcement agencies in D.C. So for the state houses, for the local secretaries of state that happen, what can they do to prepare for potential political violence that could come this November?
So we saw this during the COVID time period, if you recall, the individuals who stormed various state capitals in places like Michigan.
Gretchen Whitmer,
and
that's
I think
right.
that was a call, I think, a wake-up call for state governments that they too can be targets. And you're absolutely right. States like Texas could be at the center of the cauldron of the violence. So what can people do? They can work with experts to track disinformation and conspiracy theories that are often the drivers to individuals like Schiffer, who carried out an act of violence. He was driven by those conspiracy theories. Understanding those conspiracy theories and actually creating narratives to counter them, that is something states can actually do in a practical manner. A second thing states should be doing with federal law enforcement is teaming up with the law enforcement teams on social media companies that actually have social media law enforcement teams that are designed to work directly with law enforcement, because quite often they're going to have information that can point to an individual carrying out a potential act of violence. And I think the case from this week is a really a harbinger of things to come, where you see posts on things like Truth, you see things like Patriots Win, you see this Civil War talk, and tracking that and actually highlighting the threats and doing wellness checks could be one way to try to counter some of these threats.
But Tiffany, here's the problem. Last month, folks, the National Defense Authorization Act, that was an amendment to deal with white supremacy in law enforcement and the police and the military. 208 Republicans voted against it. So the issue isn't just, okay, reach out to law enforcement. We have to deal with the reality that there are white supremacists who are in police departments. You just had the former cop in Virginia sentenced to 7 years in prison for what took place on January 6th. And so part of the problem now is, who do we now trust? Who do we call? And so we're now dealing with that as well. And so the Republican Party, they also don't want to deal with it because those are their voters. And that's why they don't want to deal with it. And so the reason my book, White Fear, is dropping is September 13th. I need people to understand, this is not a Trump thing. This is literally far beyond Trump. This is a party that appeals directly to white nationalism, white supremacy. That is a fundamental organizing element of the Republican Party, and Democrats cannot play footsie with what is going on.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about law enforcement, who do we trust? We have to remember police were on both sides of the barricade that day on January 6th. There were police officers who participated in the insurrection.
And members of the military.
Absolutely.
Ashley Babbitt, who was killed. Again, that's there. And the Republican Party voted against rooting them out, and they're angry the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, wants to attack it by saying, oh, it's all about woke. No, it's about getting rid of white supremacists in the military with guns and badges.
But, you know, I get your point, Roland, but I think the thing that frightens me the most is we're talking about systems. You know, how can the system protect itself? I think, you know, given our history in this country, we have to talk about individuals. How do we protect ourselves? Because
that's why you've seen a rapid increase of black people with guns.
They're disproportionately armed.
Yes,
even if, like, they're still disproportionately armed.
Look, Charles Cobb wrote a book about the use of guns in the Black Freedom Movement. There was a group called the Deacons of Defense who protected black people. That is actually happening where people are saying, look, we can't depend on you to protect us. His book was called This Nonviolent Stuff is Going to Get You Killed. And so that still exists. You're seeing black gun clubs dramatically increase. Yeah. The impact of domestic terrorism, white domestic terrorism against Americans is real.
It's
not
terrifying.
Muslim, white domestic terrorism.
Yeah, it's terrifying. All right, well, Roland Martin is going to stick around because he brings too much funk for these small segments. Jason Vladeikis, you were great. I'm having all these wonderful guests this morning, so I hope you come back, Jason, because I love the information you had to share with us. Thanks so much for being here.